Okay, I guess we'll get started with the afternoon keynote. Welcome. I hope you all had a good lunch. We're from Flexera Software. Just reading through the title out there. Might sound a yearful. Let me put that and simplify it a little more. So what we're going to talk about today is trends in the industry that we've been seeing, and its impact. Specifically, as it applies to you guys, which is packaging. I'm going to focus on the first half, talking about the general trends, what are the transformations that are taking place in the IT industry and how it applies to packaging, and some guidelines and some best practices surrounding that. And then Logan, who's my partner, is going to focus on mobile, specifically mobile, because we see a lot of interest there, and we see a lot of changes that are happening. So, Logan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Logan Hutchinson. I'm the product manager for Admin Studio. So I've been with Flexera for quite a while. Just came onto Admin Studio about a year ago. Before that, I was the product manager for Install Shield and Install Anywhere. Been in product management for about 10 years, my entire career, so across multiple types of apps. So there's probably not much that I haven't seen and heard. So with regards to that field, and then Ravi, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so I'm Ravi Mazumdar. Been working in this technology since 1994. Started my career at a company called Install Shield, and then been there. Took a break for about 3 years. At about 2006, came back in 2009. So been in this business for a while. So that's why I thought I'll start off with a story, right? So, this story is the way we're looking at things today, because we have to be ready ahead of you guys so that we give you the tools and technologies that you can use, as these transformations are taking place. So once upon a time, when when you guys only had to deal with Windows desktops and laptops, and I understand that many of you are still in that mode. You're dealing with Windows desktops, laptops, managing Windows XP and Windows 7. And there were a fixed number of applications out there. You had simple things like Adobe Acrobat, Reader, you had Microsoft Office, and the likes. They were pretty much standalone desktop applications, that needed to be packaged, and MSI was the gold standard, right? And so what you were doing as a part of that is, Keith, a few of these things that I highlighted there. You had to repackage an EXE into an MSI, test it for conflicts with other applications, as well as with OS snapshots or OS images to see if there are any conflicts when, let's say, patches are applied and things like that. Sometimes edit the MSI, make changes to the MSI, fix some errors, ICE rules, best practices, and so on, and then deploy it. And even the deployment, sometimes some companies use SMS. Some companies simply deployed using Active Directory scripts. And some of them are just manually sent over. Somebody would go, take the MSI and say, install it from this network location. So sounds familiar, but things have been changing, right? So the app story now, and how are we seeing the industry changed? And it's been changing over the past few years. It started with consumers, and now because the consumers have adopted all these technologies that I'm going to talk about, they've been knocking on the doors of the enterprises. And enterprises and software, and companies can't ignore them. One, whoops, I think a bug with this clicker, but let's talk about what are changing. First, there's been an introduction of a whole new set of devices. It's no longer just laptops or notepads or desktops. It's, the first one out there is actually a Mac. So there is a growth of Macs in a corporate environment. People want to bring in their Macs and use it, for many reasons. The smartphones have made a huge inroad. People want to consume applications, using smartphones. Tablets, recently introduced, have made big inroads. Started off with CEOs, I don't care. I want to get my iPad in. I want to use it to access my corporate data. I want to use it to access my corporate applications. And these devices are running on a whole slew of operating systems. So we're not talking about just Windows alone. You're talking about iOS. You're talking about Mac OS, Windows Surface, Android. And let's not forget HTML5, because even though that is it's a browser standard, we consider that as a platform because it's designed for the next generation UI to run within a browser, and it actually can be applied across all these devices. So HTML5 is an important platform to consider. And the number of apps have been just simply growing exponentially. It's just no longer simple desktop apps. These are apps that are connecting to services in the back office, whether they're running inside a data center or whether they're running in the cloud. It's no longer standalone desktop applications like Adobe Reader or something. It's not Office. It's about Evernote, which is a note-taking application. It saves all its data in the cloud, whether it's a public cloud or a private cloud. And Salesforce.com, that has a client application that runs on an iPad or an iPhone, but is accessing data from the cloud. So this is the change that we're seeing in the application landscape. So what does this mean to IT? What does it mean to an enterprise? So one, we've seen that obvious thing. A standard PC is being replaced by all these devices. On an average, an enterprise user today, and this is not across the board, has about 3 devices that they're managing. A traditional laptop or a desktop, a mobile phone, and a tablet. So this is recent development. So because there are a number of devices that are coming into the picture, a single person or a single enterprise user has more than one device. There's a paradigm shift. You can't be thinking device-centric. You have to think user-centric. What does that user want? Because it may vary between what device that they are using at a particular time. So you have to be user-centric in approaching packaging, in approaching the day-to-day activities that you do. So the whole concept, previously we used to have a concept of putting a whole bunch of, a core set of applications, might include Office, a bunch of Adobe applications, a bunch of semantic applications, roll it into one image, and then, get the image out to users. So that's changing now. Because of the number of devices and the fact that we've actually changed from device-centric to user-centric, it's better to offer self-service, the iTunes-like experience. It doesn't make sense to just deploy all applications on all devices to all users. It just doesn't make sense. It's not cost-effective. Not only, the total cost of ownership is going to just, quadruple. It might exponentially increase. So you have to be careful there. And then, in the back office, we've seen that all these applications are connecting to some, back office components, back office, services. And those back office services are moving from physical data centers to virtualized cloud services. People want to take advantage of the whole, cloud paradigm. Offers elasticity. It's cost effective to run in a cloud versus, adding physical machines to, the data centers. So it gives you all those advantages. So a little bit about the desktop transformations that are taking place. And this is the transformations that I listed here are in order, and they're in logical order. So the first was, introduction of Windows 7 into the marketplace, and that made a huge change. I mean, it brought in 64-bit computing into the mainstream, and it was a huge advantage. Took care of the 2 gig RAM limit, and many advantages. 64-bit computing was big. And to have an ordinary user, an enterprise ordinary user, not an IT person or not a developer, running on a 64-bit system is great. I mean, just to take advantage of 64-bit operating system is really cool. So that was the first big change in the slew of desktop transformations. The next is application virtualization. Even though the technologies, AppV, ThinApp, they were all released before Windows 7, they really started getting traction, taking shape after Windows 7 was rolled out. That's when people saw advantage. You don't need to install it. You can just package it into a virtual app, drop it on a machine, and it runs. So, and then some of the interesting facts around it is that some of our customers are saying they're targeting up to 60% of their apps to be virtualized. So that's a pretty big number. I think we're helping them as much as possible. And I think this is a goal that we'd like everybody to shoot for and keep growing above that. So with application virtualization came desktop virtualization. Maintaining and managing physical hardware, replacing it every once a few years, it's too expensive. It's not just the hardware that needs to be replaced, it's the total cost of ownership of procuring that hardware, rolling an image out on it, and maintaining each and every image for the users. It's way too expensive. And VDI and desktop virtualization have played an important role there. I mean, you imagine that you're replacing all these physical hardware and the images with a centralized global Windows image, and then you have in a non-persistent mode, and you have these applications that are streamed in when the user logs in, and when the user logs out, everything is destroyed, and you're still maintaining that pristine image. And patching is going to be easy for that, and just maintaining updates are going to be easy on that. So it just makes sense for users to, for companies to adopt desktop virtualization, but not possible without the first two. That's why I said that it's in logical order. Windows 7, application virtualization, and then desktop virtualization. And some of the numbers that we're seeing out there, 30% reduction in operating costs. And that's it's an industry, standard, figure. And 24% of the enterprises say that at least 10 to 25% of their apps are delivered through VDI now. That was possibly a 2012 number. So the numbers may have grown now. But one of the challenges in desktop virtualization, or VDI, is that it doesn't make sense to deliver VDI unless you have a good user experience. Imagine you walking in with an iPhone, and the iPhone rendering a true Windows desktop UI, which with the start menu and all that. It just doesn't. It's difficult to use. It doesn't lend itself well to all the devices that are out there. Some devices, it may make sense. So for example, if you bring in your Mac, and then you are logging into a VDI session, and that renders a very Windows desktop-like UI, it makes sense, and it's usable. But not so much on an iPhone or an iPad or something like that. So that's why a bunch of companies, including VMware, Citrix, and there's another company called Centrix, have introduced what are called workspace aggregators. And what it is basically aggregating a whole bunch of applications, both desktop applications as well as web applications, in a UI presented in a virtual session that is very, that's device agnostic and easily consumable across all these different devices, And the common thing between all these different devices is the fact that they take full advantage of touch. And that's what workspace aggregation brings in. The other added benefits to workspace aggregation is that it allows single sign-on. So when you log in to the workspace, it ensures that the apps that are running within that framework or container are all single sign-on. I mean, it integrates with Active Directories, so your web applications that integrate with AD are automatically, you're automatically logged into it. Client applications, email clients, and all that stuff is taken care of. And it runs in a container, so in a virtual session, to some extent, it's also secure. So these are the key, desktop transformations that have taken place and that will impact you when it comes down to, packaging. So the importance of the data center. Historically, we've always, focused on desktop products and desktop applications, how to package them, how to fix them, how to deploy them. But I think because of the changing paradigm where, it's no longer a standalone, desktop client. It's a rather, thin desktop client, native but thin desktop client that is connecting to something in the back office. It is getting a bulk of its information from the back office. So I'll take, this whole example of Evernote or OneNote or, even Salesforce.com. It runs in a browser on the desktop. It runs as a native app on an iPhone. And it is accessing the same back office component. Salesforce.com is not a great example because it's a hosted system run by Salesforce, but there are many applications within your enterprise. Could be a small, take for example an insurance company that sends out field agents to assess accidents and things like that. They have an assessment application probably runs within a browser if they have their laptop, probably runs as a native app if they have their iPad or their iPhone, but is accessing the same back office server component that's probably running inside the customer's data center in their premises, on their premises, or in their service provider's premises. And some of the desktop applications, like agents that are, specifically designed to do certain things, just probably an agent that monitors that a particular service is running and shuts it down, or small things like that, will run on servers. They're not designed just to run on desktops. Antivirus is one of those things. It runs on a desktop. It should run on a server as well. It can run on Windows 7 desktop. It should run on a Windows 2012 server. And so those need to be accounted for. That's why servers and server applications are important here. And the fact that these servers are moving from physical to virtual to true cloud. So physical machines are these physical server boxes that are bought, an OS is installed on the machine, and it's plugged into the rack. The next stage is they're moving to virtual, where you're buying a larger box, so you don't have to buy many boxes all the time. And then you're installing a hypervisor on it, and you're bringing up virtual images on which applications are installed. And then a true cloud, where you're not only installing the hypervisor, but you're also taking advantage of some of the cloud platforms, the private cloud platforms that have been released by both VMware and Microsoft. And so you get a true elastic model in which you can play with in terms of resources, CPU resources, disk space, RAM, and so on. So those have to be considered. So that's why, one, think about the data center, think about server applications, and the fact that these data centers are moving from physical to virtual and then on to the cloud. So putting all what we talked together, let's look at an application in a different context now. We saw an application where we talked about it was running on a Windows laptop or a Windows desktop. MSI was the gold standard, and a certain number of tasks needed to be done by you guys as packagers before it's deployed in the enterprise. So we'll take an example of an application. So it's got to be deployed on all these devices. Now, it's got to be deployed on a traditional laptop or a desktop running Windows 7, 8, whatever. It might need to also be consumable. And I'll say the word consumable because it may not be native. It also needs to be consumable on a Mac machine, a Mac laptop, a MacBook, on an iPad, on a Windows Surface tablet, an Android mobile phone, as well as an iPhone. So these are all the things that you need to sort of service your application on. So all these are running different operating systems. It could be Windows 8, it could be Windows 7 on a traditional laptop, Mac OS on the Mac, iOS on the iPhone and the iPad, and then Windows RT on the Surface, and an Android on the Android device. There you go. So, and there are a number of, what we call management platforms by which these can be delivered to those devices or those machines. So on Windows, you have, System Center, SCCM, that's handling the delivery of the apps to the endpoints. Citrix ZenDesktop and Citrix App are, two VDI options that are offered by Citrix. VMware View is a VDI technology from VMware. You could deliver applications in a VDI session that could potentially run on the Mac or any of the other devices. Alteryx is another application configuration management system, just like System Center. And we'll talk about these new platforms, AirWatch and MobileIron, which are what are called MDMs, or mobile device management systems, or mobile application management systems, which Logan will talk in more detail, coming up soon. And then, these are the ones that will deliver a mobile application, to the mobile device. So all these, these are the platforms that need to be considered. And then, so you have a number of different package formats out here. Now, we talked about the MSI. We have an AppV package that can be, deployed either, on a XenApp presentation server or on a ZenDesktop, or it can also be physically, sent over via SCCM to be, streamed on a, directly on a laptop. We have a ThinApp package that could be delivered via VMware View on a iOS device, be it a iPad or an iPhone. We have a semantic virtualized package, virtual package, SWE, that can be used, that can be delivered via Alteryx or some other mechanism. And then we have the native apps, which are an Android native app and an iOS native app, which can be deployed through either AirWatch or MobileIron as native apps to the appropriate devices, either an Android device or a iOS device. And let's not forget the fact that there might be a web variant of all these applications that will run inside the browser on these platforms. And if you take the complexity there, you're talking about Internet Explorer version whatever, 8, 9, 10, running on the laptop, Safari running on the Mac OS, Safari running on iOS, IE, a version of IE that is running on the Surface tablet, and in either Chrome or a custom browser that is running on the Android device. Because an Android device, more than normal, frequently comes with more than one browser. Chrome has to be included in it because it's Google's operating system, and then the vendor might also create, put in their own browser version. So we got to consider HTML5 as well. So if you look at this, it's a many-to-many mapping here between the three between the 4 layers here, or with some limitations. So yeah, so the packaging, call it opportunity or call it complexity, is just exponentially increased. And in there, I mean, you still have to continue to do the normal tasks that you are used to doing in this last thing that you're familiar with, which is MSI, System Center, Windows 8, or Windows 7 on the laptop. That is something that you are familiar with. To a certain extent, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the app virtualization formats. But then this is increased over to all these mobile, as well as VDI, et cetera. And you still have to do these tasks. You have to test for application compatibility. Except now you have to test and make sure that this NIOS application is compatible with iOS 7 just before iOS 7 is deployed on the devices. In a year's time, you'll have iOS 8. And it gets even more complicated with Android because the updates to Android are much more frequent. Same thing with the Windows mobile devices. So it's just you are doing the same things, but your opportunity and your capability to touch other devices, other technologies, other operating systems has just grown immensely. So what do you do? I mean, see, this is the standard steps that we call 6 steps to application readiness. And these apply, and these have been proven. We've many customers adopting this. Our tools have been built around this. But this, forgetting about the tools, this is something that you have to do no matter what. Whether it's an MSI, whether it's a mobile application, whether you're running on a VDI session, or whether you're deploying it, the package to a physical machine. These are steps that you have to do. You have to identify the applications first. What is it that you are, migrating? You have to rationalize to make sure you're not wasting your time. You obviously have to assess compatibility, whether it's on Windows 7, Windows 8, iOS 7, or maybe it's an iPad, an iPad mini versus, a regular iPad. Is a particular application designed to run on iPad mini or iPad, the larger size iPad? You got to plan your next steps, whether you want to convert or you want to deploy it as is. In fix and package, you're going to be virtualizing, you're going to be, fixing the MSI, and then deploying. And deploying is primarily to publish to the various, management platforms, be it SCCM, be it Alteryx, be it Citrix XenApp. So you have to do it. And when you deploy it, you have to provide a whole bunch of metadata along with the application so that management platform knows what to do when it actually sends the application out, knows how to, which machines to install that application on, which machines not to install. So this metadata is really important. So you have to provide that metadata along with the application to the platform. Okay, so the next couple of slides are going to be talking about certain guidelines on how you can approach this. This is by no means the whole thing, the whole recommendation, but this is the way I'd like you to get started. I'd like you to adopt some of these best practices that will help you manage the complexity. And again, the complexity that I drew up in that slide is the whole shebang, the whole big picture. Many of you may be dealing with only a part of it. It's not all the time. I mean, so in the devices that come into an enterprise, you have 2 models. One is that the enterprise itself or the company does introduce multiple devices, but are all managed by IT. Or it can take the other policy of doing the BYOD, which is allowing employees to bring their own device and then managing the applications and corporate data on those devices in a secure way. So, I think the industry trend right now is more towards taking the former, which is allowing, actually introducing the new devices, but managed by IT. But I think eventually, enterprises are going to get to that, BYOD model, because it just makes sense from a cost effectiveness. I think eventually CIOs will be sold on BYOD, but I don't think it's going to happen, right away. So the first, step is identify the applications to be changed or managed. So you might have these, sitting on a network drive somewhere. They might be residing on an older version of a management platform. So for example, you might have all applications residing in SCCM 2007. The company is moving to SCCM 2012. They're also introducing Windows 7, and they're also introducing AppV. This is something that we've heard a lot. These three platforms at once. And it makes sense. So for that to happen, you need to be able to identify your applications in SCCM 2007, as well as do your assessment, do your conversion, as well as publish. So identify in an effective way. Make sure you have a list of all these applications. So catalog your application portfolio. Rather than using a spreadsheet or a Word document with names and locations of all these applications, put them in a database, whatever it is, and organize it such that you can use it in the future. The applications are versioned. There's history maintained as you make changes to these applications, whether it's testing, whether it's packaging, and then deploying. So you have a history of exactly what is happening at every point of time. And then organize these applications in a very logical way, within that, within the catalog or a database, whatever it is. One is application logical groups, which, most of you, I'm pretty sure, have used this policy from a long time, is to basically say, here are all the departments in my company, or it could be geographical regions like North America, Europe, Asia, and so on, and organize the apps in those folders so that they're better managed. And the second thing is, because we're introducing a whole new number of package types, and we're introducing not just MSI, we're introducing a whole slew of virtual applications like AppV, ThinApp, semantic virtualization, et cetera. And many companies may want to try out different virtualization technologies before nailing down on one. So you probably are going to have multiple virtualization technologies at play before you say, look, I've decided that I will go with ThinApp or I will go with AppV. So you have to maintain all these different technologies. So organize the application and then all the deployment types under that. Understand current usage. So that means if I have Adobe Reader, and I have a similar a complementary product that also does that also lets me view PDF files and make edits to PDF files. Understand how many people are using either of these products. If one product is being used significantly more than the other one, your priority to package, test that more frequently used app is probably higher than the lower one. So try to understand that. That's very important. Also, if you have Adobe Reader 8 and Adobe Reader 9, why would you want to spend time in packaging Adobe Reader 8? If you would want to spend time in packaging, testing the latest and greatest if it's going to be rolled out across the company. And don't ignore server applications. As I mentioned, the back office and the data center applications are important. I'll take an example right here, enterprise expenses 4.5. Think of it as a line of business. I mean, it's an, an enterprise application does expense reporting or expense management within a company. Could have been bought by, from a third-party source. They would have, or been custom developed by a company, probably given as an MSI, needs to be installed on the server, or given as some other format. And before that's installed, you need to assess its compatibility on the server operating system that you have. Could be Windows 2008 R2, or Windows Server 2012. But don't forget that it doesn't end there. That server application has a web client that is consumed by all the users. So just testing the server application against server readiness is not enough. You need to make sure that the web client is tested against the various IE versions. Better to organize both deployment types, which is one is a web client and one is the server MSI, under one application. Test it so your reporting is much more better, and you'll be able to make a much more intelligent decision to say a go or no go against that application. So next one, my very favorite topic, automate as much as possible. Repeatable processes can be automated. I think you should make all processes repeatable. MSI has been around for a long time. And they're very true tested, processes around, how to, convert an EXE into an MSI, how to convert an MSI into an AppV package, testing of MSI packages against Windows 7 readiness, Windows 8 readiness, or Server 2008 readiness. So I think automate as much as possible. So runbooks and PowerShell scripts traditionally have been introduced to be run for server automation. But these days, many people are using it. We saw Darwin's session where PowerShell was used extensively on desktops, right? So take advantage of PowerShell, take advantage of runbooks, automate as much of the packaging process as possible. These are a couple of guidelines, but I think my recommendation and my goal is always to stretch the limits here, and always to say what can't we automate rather than what can we automate. So if you think that way, I think you'll be in good shape. But keep in mind that not everything can be automated, especially things that are still evolving, things that are still not quite mature. So enable self-service. We talked about all these multitudes of devices, different operating systems. Packaging is going to get more complex, and it's not necessary that that I want. It's not necessary that I want a particular application that I request on all my devices. I may need it only on my iPad. I may not need it on my desktop. So Evernote is something that is easy to take notes down on a mobile device. But if I'm using my laptop, I might as well just use Word or something like that. Given that, why bother rolling out all the apps to everyone? Better to give the self-service experience like iTunes or the Google Play Store. Have the users, but with the security of having the App Store run within your firewall and within your company. Give them that experience. Strike a balance between control as well as giving the users a choice to install what they want when they want, and whatever device they are allowed to use and consume that application. Automate the processes. And to help make the self-service easier. When a user requests an application, make it such that it goes through an automated process where the manager approves it, and the license administrator, who knows how many licenses are available of that particular application within an enterprise, immediately gets notified and does an approval right away. So automate all that as much as possible. And the next thing is guideline is to collaborate. The complexity of packaging is just, you've seen the complexity of packaging. You're talking about native mobile applications running on iOS, running on Android. You're talking about different, application virtualization technologies. You're talking about deploying to multiple, management platforms. Although not every company is going to have, many of them. Most companies will have, one of them. Some will have a subset of them. But you are going to have a mobile component. You are going to have a desktop component. And my guess is most of the companies are going to adopt some sort of a VDI model. So there is going to be complexity that's brought in. And not one person can do everything. That's why you have to divide and conquer. And you have to collaborate. Reality is, teams are global today. Not every person in every company is in one location. They're spread across the globe. And they're in North America, they're in Europe, they're in APAC, they're all over the globe. And they are, and this is teams in a single company. And they need to work together to bring a unified output in terms of these packaging, in terms of testing a package, in terms of fixing a package, in terms of converting a package from one version to another, or publishing it eventually to the deployment system. So you need to have some sort of a good workflow system to collaborate and be very efficient, and also provide real-time reporting to the management on whether you're doing okay with regards to a large packaging project, or are you behind, et cetera. And then, last thing before I hand it over to Logan is that, resources are scarce, and packagers are a rare breed. So I think the people who are sitting here constitute one of the largest groups of packagers I have seen in one single location. You take .NET developers, it'll fill up this entire building. So packagers are a rare breed, so you need to collaborate. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Logan.
Thanks, Ravi. And I think this is such an important point because I'm going to talk about mobile, but I just wanted to ask Ravi because I think that one of the ways that you can increase collaboration is through some new technology called crowdsourcing, right? And a lot of you have probably seen that out there, but one of the things I wanted to emphasize, I heard Chris Jackson talking this morning, is that $2.5 billion spent on packaging, right? And the cost of creating a package is rising, right? And so I would be willing to guess that, many of you have solved similar issues with tough packages, right? And many of you have the opportunity to collaborate within your organization, but maybe not with the community at large. And so crowdsourcing is something that we can bring to the community and that brings the community together to have resolutions in real time. And to be clear, there's a ton of apps that are out there doing it right now in some way or another. You have Salesforce, which has chatter. You have an app out there called Waze, which actually does traffic through everyone's phone, and it'll collect traffic information about where you're going or what the traffic is like in a certain area just by pinging the people that are in that area, or they can check in similar to Facebook. There's others, Google Maps, a startup out there called My Villages that are doing these things. And so, Ravi talked about this. The list of app types are growing, the operating systems are growing, and so this information is getting scattered everywhere, right? And so I want to be clear about crowdsourcing is that I'm not talking about scrolling through blogs. How many of you, raise your hand if you've spent hours scrolling through a blog trying to find a resolution to an issue? Quite a few, right? So what I'm talking about is having an organized community with organized data where you can have user Ravi, and Ravi can create his set of advice, and we can know that Ravi has solved a particular issue on Snagit. You can import that issue and have the remediation for that issue immediately. And it can apply across all steps of the packaging process. And so it links cloud data to an on-premise application for real-time intelligence and real-time remediation of a particular issue. So, this is just a screenshot. I won't plug what this is, but this is a test center of an application, right? And so you may be typical of seeing these results, right, in something, and then you go and you see the little wrench there, or you see the warning sign, and you say, well, crap, what am I supposed to do now, right? if it doesn't have an automatic remediation? Well, you could go out and you could say, see more in the community about this particular issue and help to resolve some of those issues in a quicker fashion. And I think to the point earlier about bringing in efficiency to the packaging process is really the next step to this, right? Let's lower the cost of doing this and utilize technologies like this that are out there. So that's my only point on Ravi's last mention, but I wanted to spend the time that I have focused on mobile because I think it's so important for you as packagers to understand and to start to get into this lingo of what mobile is and what it means. So quick show of hands here right now. How many of you have, I know you're going to raise your hand for sure. How many of you have some sort of smart device or tablet? iPhone, Android, tablet? Exactly my point. How many of you used it to play Angry Birds? Very good. So the rest of you are lying. So the thing that I want to say is that, and then the next question is, how many of you are using it for work? Not just email. How many of you are using it to access work information or do work? So the difference there that said that they have some type of device and didn't play Angry Birds, I'm kind of confused at, but that's okay. So the point is that you're using these devices for work, right? And you're using native apps for work. You're using work apps and you're wanting access to those apps. And so what that is, and a trend that we're following, right, is that there's this large exponential increase in the enterprises and the customers you serve of mobile apps. And there's native and there's browser-based applications that Ravi mentioned. Some of these apps that are out there are deep linked to a public app store, or they're only distributed internally. So you may have an app that is an internal app only, and that has to go through some type of mobile asset management system to be delivered. Mobile device management and mobile app management tools and vendors. So these are an emerging category of startups and established systems management vendors, SCCM being one, that are now shifting their models to be able to deliver mobile applications. So SCCM, you see them adding Intune. You saw Ravi mention AirWatch and Mobile Iron. These people are coming online quickly, and they're growing quickly because the need is there. So central management and security is a tangible problem for these IT groups because you have these situations where in an enterprise, take a financial institution that develops a financial app for their traders. Their traders take that app, it's distributed individually to them. There's no security on that app. When that app breaks, A, they come to IT to want it to get fixed, and two, they can still take a screenshot or send information from that app in an email, right? They can take that screenshot that they're not supposed to do and send that information off. And so those are a couple of security concerns, obviously, for the enterprise that you want to keep track of. And then Ravi alluded to this, right? That what's fueling this is that the consumer user experience is fueling the growth of mobile apps and the development of mobile apps within the enterprise because you have CIOs that just think, why can't this is just an app. I can just download from the App Store and use this right away. Why is it so complicated? I don't get it. Well, within the enterprise, it's much different than us going to the App Store. There's security concerns, there's compatibility concerns, there's licensing concerns associated with that. And so you have to think through this a lot more, but you have somebody on the other side of that that's sitting there saying, why can't I get this right away? And so obviously you have users that want fast and immediate results with that. So this is just a graphic that says they want that App Store-like experience when they go to work to be able to get access to their applications. So now I'll talk a little bit about MDM, which is mobile device management, and MAM, which is mobile asset management or mobile application management. And I said a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of startups out there, AirWatch and Mobile Iron, that are actually developing mobile device management software that better enables IT departments to manage those mobile devices, the tablets, the phones, things like that that are under management, and kind of set up a group of apps. But what they're not concerned with is the app itself and the security of the app itself. Many of them have mobile application management systems tied to them because their customers have asked for it, but they really don't have that technology vetted out yet to properly manage the mobile applications. again, these mobile applications aren't taken through a proper application readiness process. So to my point before, we've talked to customers that the app is developed somewhere in the enterprise, it's deployed by the developer using Apple technology to deploy, and it just gets out there with without any security or any application readiness associated with it. We talked about the players that are in this area. They go anywhere from brand new startups to the classic systems management vendors like Citrix or Microsoft. And really, at the end of the day, you can look at these systems just like we look at any other deployment system that we put apps on. So it could be SCCM 5 to 7 years ago, right? These companies are very mature or immature in the type of data that they're getting about their apps from upstream systems. So this is just a screenshot of some of those that are out there right now. You guys can go take a look at their websites. You can find a lot of good information about them. I won't bore you with Gartner because I know how much Gartner is so accurate all the time. But this basically is a slide that just shows where MDM is. And Gartner is actually starting to report on MDM and mobile application management. And you'll see MobileIron and AirWatch are way up there. So I encourage you guys to go out and take a look at what they're doing as far as device management and as far as mobile application management, because it's very interesting. So, looking at these apps, I'm going to kind of talk about a few categories of some things that are out there. Is that there's a debate of native versus non-native, and I think Ravi talked about that, right? A native being we're using the SDK of the manufacturer, whether it be Apple, whether it be Android, whether it be Windows, doesn't matter, but we're building a native application. And non-native being simply just a browser-based application. And then these mobile app packages. So Chris Jackson talked about this a little bit earlier. These are mostly flat files now. They come in different flavors. IPA is for iOS, ADK is for Android, AppX is for Windows Store apps, and then you have Zap, which is the Windows Phone. And so these are all just packages, just like MSIs. The only difference is that they're flat. They're not based upon a database. And then mobile application compatibility. So looking at compatibility of native apps, so you have so much more that comes into the picture in this than just the operating system compatibility. Think about your device when you deploy it internally. You may need to know if an app and a device supports a front-facing camera. Does it support Bluetooth? Does it support the accelerometer? You need to know those types of things when it gets deployed. And some of these files that you get can tell you that information before an application goes out. Non-native applications, think about browser compatibility across a multitude of devices. So you have a device, an iPad, an iPad mini, an Android, all running different browsers, and you need to check that compatibility of the application against the browser that's on the device itself. And then mobile app wrapping we'll get into, right? This is strictly about the security within the enterprise. And it's strictly about putting a wrapper around a mobile package. So for all of those that, I'm sure all of you know what a bootstrapper is, right, within the MSI world. Think of this kind of like a bootstrapper, right? So you can wrap a mobile package and you can control that mobile package and say no copy paste from Evernote or no screenshots allowed from this particular app. There's a whole plethora of things that you can do to better secure that mobile app before it goes out into your environment. So we talked a lot about this, is that mobile app compatibility. So every mobile app lays out bits in a flat manifest file, which usually contain what's called these key pair values that can be read and matched to a particular device. I talked about it a second ago. Does the app require Bluetooth? Does it need a front-facing camera? What OS does it require? And then repackaging software can read these manifest files. For example, in iOS, that manifest file is called info.plist. And info.plist contains these key pair values, can be read out of that, and they can be matched against Apple's ever-changing SDKs and ever-changing documentation to determine what the package dependencies are. This information can then, if you look at the flow, can then be passed downstream to your mobile device management systems, whether they be traditional ones that are evolving or whether they be some of the new ones. And what this does is it removes steps for administrative users. Much like when you take a package, you deploy it to SCCM right now, that MSI has a lot of information that doesn't have to be keyed in manually about how it's deployed and who it's deployed to and what the requirements are for it. Tests and reporting can be run against the app. So you can have reporting about your application estate that says we have X number of applications and 30% of them are mobile. 30% of them are running on Safari, right? So you can report against those, before it goes to the deployment system. So this is just a screenshot of a mobile app that I was working on. Actually, is that this is the package. It was called VLC, and you see the info.plist file in there. Again, it's laid out flat. Everything in there that you see is an asset for the app. But that info.plist file is critical, and each one of the Android packages, the iOS packages, the Windows packages have this file in there that can be read. So app wrapping, usually we talked about employees are using both public and internal apps on their mobile devices. Obviously, that presents a security problem for the enterprise, right? IT doesn't want to allow certain things such as the use of screenshots or copy-paste into corporate email. So what you're seeing here is that the MDM vendors, the ones that I mentioned earlier, are developing these wrapping technologies or these wrapping APIs, if you will, that allow these security measures to be implemented. Now, these APIs right now are their intellectual property. They're third party, they build them, but they just build them using mobile device management stacks that are on the devices themselves. And so it's really not, they're really just kind of an in-between. So there's a couple of different approaches you can take. You can say, do I want to have expertise in a particular MDM wrapping technology, or do we want to look broader at something that's more of a standard language in that you can create wrappers in a standard way? Again, they're not, this is the key point about mobile apps, right? And it is that they're not taken through a proper packaging process. And just looping back to what Ravi said is that the point is that we have this packaging process right now, right? And we've seen that for a long time. That packaging process still applies, but the point is that it will evolve and it will change because you may not do things this way or that way with a mobile app, but it still is a process, and it still has to follow a process. And we may evolve that lens there a little bit to do things with mobile, but it still has to be taken through a process. Because if you start doing these like you do MSIs, you're going to be in the world that MSI, before MSI, where everything is scattered and you don't know anything about the apps that are there, you don't know the compatibility, you're going to have these type of problems. Browser compatibility. So there's a huge debate in the mobile industry. Many of you have probably heard it about native versus non-native applications, right? What do I build? Do I build a native application? Do I build a non-native application? And strictly the argument for that is user experience and access to the device's functions. So HTML5 has come a long way, but still can't do many of the functions that the actual native SDKs can do and provide the user experience that they can do. But there's a lot of people that are building these browser-based applications because it gives them much more flexibility. They don't have to have the internal staff that know the Apple SDKs, for example. They can just know HTML5 and they can code around this in a mobile, for a mobile form factor. But it presents compatibility challenges. As we heard about earlier with IE, these different form factors have to be tested in different ways. So it's not just testing my browser on my desktop anymore, it's testing my browser across different operating system platforms, iOS 6, iOS 7, and then the browsers that are on that, whether it be Safari, now you have Chrome, you've had Chrome for a while, Chrome for your iPhone, Chrome for your iPad, being able to test against those different things for your mobile apps. And so this is just a view strictly of what we see. This is what we have now and what we see now as a common application readiness process, right? It's the repository, assessing the compatibility, you fix it, you package it, you deploy it. They're MSIs, they're EXEs, they're AppV, they're ThinApp, they're XenApp, and they're websites and URLs. As this evolves, you start to see this really get complex, right? And now you have the MDMs on one side, you're bringing in different mobile types, you're bringing in non-native apps across multiple devices. So the picture's getting complex, but the process stays the same, right? Same type of thing. So I always like to end it because, as we all know, the people that buy from us are the ultimate end game, right? And they're the ones that are going to drive this. And we've talked to a lot of customers about mobile. And they've approached us about mobile and said, what are we going to do about mobile? We have no control over the mobile apps that are within the enterprise. And so this one is just about a large financial institution in the United States. At the time, they had 15 plus mobile applications that they said were growing exponentially. And these are worldwide. And the funny thing he said is these are the only ones I'm aware of. And the next thing he said is that I'm approving, the bullet's down there a little further, but he said, I'm approving 40 Macs per week for this. And Mac has the only IDE in Xcode to develop iOS applications. So you can kind of put the two together and surmise that, well, if I'm approving 40 Macs per week, I doubt I have a lot of new graphic designers that are coming in, right? So the usage of Macs is coming in, and people are developing more mobile apps. And so, and they're using the public stores. They're using Apple's enterprise sideloading to do them. This customer had one MDM in place, but it didn't meet their needs. They were looking at Mobile Iron and AirWatch, and they were worried about the same things we talked about. At the end of the day, I asked the question, what's keeping you up about mobile? Central management, deployment, security, and compatibility across the devices and the OSs. So that's it on that. I think we're out of time, so no questions. Thank you.